Four kids: an 8-year-old who just wants to play, a 6-year-old who follows that older sister's lead, a 4-year-old charming little girl who loves singing and performing, and an 8-month-old baby who prefers dodging Cheerios off the high chair or military crawling across the kitchen floor like a Navy SEAL. And a mom who wants to homeschool her kids so she can live her charmed homeschool life. This was my life. And homeschooling has provided so many memories, so many amazing moments where I'd wake up in the morning and say, wow, my teenage boy is now a man. He's taller than I am. When did that happen? He was military crawling across the floor like a Navy SEAL just a few years ago, or so it felt. And I have so many pictures in my head of so many moments, so many read alouds, so many places we went, so many extracurriculars we explored, so many methods we chose in our homeschool, so many of many things. And I have so many beautiful memories homeschooling over the course of my last almost 2 decades. I wanted so many things for my kids. I wanted them to have freedom to develop and become who they were meant to be on this planet, to create an education for them that would benefit them, that would help to be individualized so that they could actually have an education that would benefit them specifically. And I wanted to enjoy all the freedoms of this homeschool life. And we did. We had it in spades. We also had other things in spades. Excited to begin our homeschool. And it really was a homeschool. I was trying to create an individualized education for each of my kids, a rich education for each of them. And we really did have that in spades. But you know what we also had in spades? A sense that it still wasn't measuring up. It wasn't quite as it should have been compared to the local private school. Maybe the kids wouldn't have textbooks or lectures or tests, but they did have a full-time scripted homeschool day, Monday to Friday, with me, including a read aloud in the morning and before bedtime. We did an afternoon history read aloud with 2 pages of narration. Yes, they were 8 and 6, and they remember it well, and it wasn't one of the happy homeschool memories. We did science experiments and spelling and grammar and second languages to coincide with our travel plans because we did a lot of world schooling, and we studied dead languages like Latin too, though my oldest daughter, who is now studying Latin still in university, doesn't think it's a dead language. You know what else we had in spades? Well, I had a defensive posturing about my homeschool choice. So when the father-in-law or the neighbor or the grocery store clerk questioned our homeschool choice, I mentally was constructing 3-point essays in here, trying to defend my choice. And you know what else I had? I still had what every other family had: complaining and whining and bickering and fidgetiness in homeschool chairs. And the kids were doing that too. And you know what else we had in spades? Concerns that we were missing something. There were gaps. Always one more gap in my kids' education. How did I know? Because the neighborhood kids were doing things that our kids weren't doing. Of course, I was also doing things that the school kids weren't doing. It didn't take long for me to realize that how I was homeschooling wasn't working for me. I would say it was dissatisfying or stressful at times because I was trying to do all the things that I thought were the right things to do for my homeschooled kids. Maybe this is you too. This is an opportunity for you to reimagine your homeschool. Are you wielding the freedoms that you have as a homeschool family? Are you creating more challenge for yourself by approaching your homeschool in a certain way? Are you more likely to create individualization in your homeschool in the way that you're doing it, or could you create more if you were doing it differently? Could you enable your child's purpose on this planet more simply and easily by creating a more individualized education for them? And how could you do that? We're going to discuss the 4 common mistakes that I often see homeschool families make that I made myself, and perhaps consider how we can reimagine our homeschool life. And if we haven't met already, my name is Teresa. I am a writer, I'm a podcaster, and I'm a life coach over at capturingthecharmlife.com. I've been homeschooling my 4 kids, aged now almost, 14 to 22, and have been doing that for the last less than couple decades. I have transitioned into the life coaching role over the last 2-3 years and have found such joy in helping homeschool moms primarily, but homeschool parents shed what's not working so they can show up authentically, confidently, and purposefully in their homeschools and in their lives. I help homeschool moms from all faiths. I help homeschool moms across the philosophical spectrum, no matter what method or approach that they're using. I really want to help them make what they're doing work for them and for their kids so that they can do it authentically, that they can do it with confidence, and they're doing their homeschool lives on purpose. I feel deeply grateful to have gone toward a path that has not just been me helping my kids do their lives on purpose, but also helping other families do that as well. And you wouldn't have to engage me in a conversation on how to do this practically in your home to deschool your homeschool. You wouldn't have to come have a chat with me. You could do this by yourself, of course. It's how I did it primarily, the hard way, but I did do it. I did it with a lot of books, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of, well, let's say certain days felt like I was hitting my head against a wall. It wasn't a lot of happy making. You wouldn't have to do this with someone else. You could do it on your own, but you could also do it alongside a coach, a homeschool coach, to really expedite the process, also to probably delete a few more frustrations along the way. This is the question that homeschool families have a hard time answering for themselves. We know that we're trying to leave a schooled mindset behind, but we don't always know what it is we're trying to leave. What do homeschoolers want to deschool from? Any number of things, but I'll suggest a few. We assume kids should always be busy and kept busy. We assume kids must have constant exposure to new things. We assume kids need to identify in a particular grade. We assume they need teachers to learn stuff. We assume learning comes best through lectures, textbooks, and testing. We assume kids need to learn certain things at certain times. We assume kids typically are at the same developmental level to receive knowledge bits at similar times. We assume kids will be interested in things we're interested in because we're interested in them. We assume we can organize learning and create systems of learning. We assume we have to switch from the role of mom to teacher, dependent on what we're discussing, or that there's only certain times of the day that kids can learn. Maybe there's only certain subjects that are considered learning. We assume that kids' emotional connection and attachment can be put on hold for 7 hours. We assume that the most important person in a child's life is his or her peers. We assume that someone else, a prescribed system developed by the experts, would know better than parents how to advocate for an education for our children. We assume that kids wouldn't know how they would need to be educated. There are so many different things that we need to learn how to deschool our mindsets. There are probably many more thoughts that you may have about what you might need to deschool from. I invite you to write them down. Imagine if your schedule could be defined by your family's rhythm, or that your activities could be guided by the specific kids and people in your homeschool. Imagine if you saw learning opportunities everywhere and creating an education didn't seem difficult. Imagine if you saw learning opportunities beyond any homeschool philosophy or any curriculum. Imagine if you could move at the flow of the seasons in your family life. Imagine if you could purchase and use curriculum or resources in a way that really served your family, or that you were able to fuel and facilitate your child's natural interests. You could enable a learning process that was useful for a specific child in front of you and not just another idealized homeschooled child. Imagine if you were clear on the answer to what is an education anyway. Imagine if you could see the connection between curiosity, play, and a real education. And imagine if you understood that all of life was a learning journey. We'll all be on it all the time, and we only need to be clear on what our kids need today. If that were your experience, how would that shape your homeschool days? So I'm going to share 4 common mistakes that I see homeschoolers make when they are creating their home education, which ultimately all these mistakes are A, things that I have done, and B, are things that bring you a lot less freedom. They just make you feel beholden to an approach, beholden to a way that isn't working for you, that isn't working for your kids, that doesn't help raise them up to become who they were meant to be. It might make the neighbors happy. It might make your mother-in-law happy. It might make the local co-op happy. Might make your husband happy, but it wouldn't necessarily be helping your children grow up and become who they were meant to be. One of the mistakes that I see homeschool moms make is to not be clear on whether the way they're homeschooling is actually working for them. So we come into homeschooling and we have our notions for whatever reasons why we think a homeschool should be the way it is, that we're going to engage in education for our kids in the way that we think is the right way. And we might come across some homeschool philosophies, like Charlotte Mason or the classical homeschooling or whatever. And we might come up with those ideas and think that those are the best ways. But maybe that's not even the thing imprinting us. Maybe what we're really influenced by is how we weren't educated the way that we wanted to be. Or maybe our partner was educated in a way they didn't want to be, and that's influencing our homeschool. Maybe the local homeschool co-op does it in a certain way and it seems okay to us. It looks good on the outside. But all of these different ways of educating, bringing home an education to engage it with our specific kids, only really is valuable if it's working for them and it's working for you. So I see homeschool parents try to bring home all those things, which is completely understandable. That's how we've been taught, is to think in doing something to the kids for the kids. This is how we're engaged in culture on what an education is anyway. So we do those things, but we don't consider, is it actually working for us and our kids? Sometimes I see homeschool families not being clear on why they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes we choose homeschooling because we don't want the alternative, but we don't have a proactive reason to do the thing we're doing called homeschooling or home education right now. This thing is not just about avoiding what is in the system, but it's about choosing what's going on in your home. I'll tell you my reasons for homeschooling. They may not be yours. And it doesn't matter because it doesn't need to be yours. They're mine. I wanted my kids to have an individualized education, to be free, to become who they were meant to be, and have a sense of purpose right from the get-go, the beginning of their childhood, to grow it up so that it was a natural progression into adulthood when they chose to take on responsibilities as adults or chose to take on activities as adults. Then they would have freedom, they would have an individualized education, and they would have a clear sense of purpose. Of course, I can't make that happen, but that was my goal. That was my intention behind my homeschool. And I see us being proactive as homeschool parents, deciding why we're doing it and be positive or proactive in our intentions. And that helps to fuel an intentional home education. But here's the thing. Even if you know why, and it's a positive, proactive reason, you're not just trying to avoid something. Though I know there's reasons to avoid things, but you're actually intentionally saying, I want this home education for my kids. Just because we have an idea of why we're doing it and we're like, oh yeah, this is a great reason, it doesn't mean it'll translate into us actually doing it, which is a problem. How do I know? Because I have been there, done that. I wanted freedom for my homeschooled kids. And then I brought them home to have a very strict private school where they were fidgeting, and so was I. But I thought it was the right thing. And yet my why, the reasons why I was doing it, for that freedom, for that individualization, so they had a sense of purpose, it wasn't aligning with the practicalities of my day, because I had great expectations of how they would engage their day, and it was scripted. It was scripted, and sometimes it was personalized. Maybe it was more personalized for the firstborn, because that is usually the one that dictates a lot of the initial energies or motivations in our homes, that we think, okay, how do we make this right for them? And then realize it doesn't work for the next child, or it doesn't work for the next child, or how many children you have. So we can make a mistake by knowing why we want to do it, but not actually translating it into practicalities in our day. And I see homeschool families don't always get clear on what they think an education is anyway. Okay, so because I did that, a traditional homeschool with Latin and a variety of other languages, because that's what I thought it was the right way to homeschool. And I'm really glad that I did. My intention was to learn about word roots and where words came from and the meaning of words, kind of like a critical thinking thing / language development or language study. And it was very interesting, at least for me. I thought it was interesting most days. I learned that the root word for education is educato. And educato means to raise up. Well, that is intriguing. To raise up. To raise up what? In our countries, I'm in Canada, you might be in the United States or Canada, around the world, but in my country, we have an education system. We call it an education system because it is a representation of an approach to educating a lot of people. We are raising up a system, or are we raising up a specific child, or two specific children? Or maybe in your home it's 12, maybe it's 4, like mine, maybe it's 1. But you are raising up your specific children, not a system of children, not a classroom of children, not a grade of children, just your children. So how does that bear out, or how does that manifest, or how does that influence your homeschool? If you are raising up your specific children, that's not going to look like how I homeschooled. And that's not going to look like how the private school homeschools or how the private school schools. You are raising up your specific child, just your specific children. Another mistake I think that homeschool families can make is that we assume that there will be one right way to do it, or that the way you'll do it now will be the way you always do it. So just like mothering or fathering or parenting, we don't get a manual in the beginning to figure out how to parent these people. In fact, we don't even know who these people are entirely. I'll tell you a story that when I was pregnant the first time, I remember, because I was a postpartum nurse before I was a mom, I had this notion that you could actually figure out what the gender was, or you could figure out how active they were, or what kind of personality they were. And that completely got thrown out the window, as you can imagine. I remember thinking, yeah, this kiddo is pretty active. She's going to be pretty active. And I actually was right, but three of them were, and one of them was definitely quiet in the womb. So I really had this idea of what they would be like. And it turns out I was sort of right, sort of not right. But even to this day, they're still growing. And my kids are aged 14 to 22 almost now, and they're still growing and becoming who they're meant to be. And I still can't fix their personality, even though I could tell you what Enneagram type they are or what Myers-Briggs number they or types they are. I could give you a personality explanation, but they're still becoming, they're still growing. We don't get that manual right off the top. We don't get told who they are, what they are, how to parent them. And we don't get told the same thing to homeschool them or to home educate them either. We just take it day by day and observe, keep paying attention, notice what's really going on. Is it working for them? Who are they really? And what do they really need right now so they can be raised up? So I've given you 5 common mistakes that I see homeschool families make that actually detract from their freedoms and the individualization in their homeschool, and also the sense of purpose that they have or that they're equipping their children to have. Let's deschool our homeschools. Let's reimagine our homeschool lives. Grab your journal and answer these questions. The first question is it working for you? Not your kids. I'm not talking about your kids right here. Is the way you're doing your homeschool life working for you? And why? The second question is it working for your kids? How do you know? And have you asked? And how can you delete a few things or shift things in order for you to move it towards a way that will work for them? How can you instill more freedoms or capture the freedoms of your homeschool life? And most important question I know is, what is an education anyway? You're a homeschool family, so you get to decide how you're going to approach education in your home with your kids. What is an education anyway? If the list of questions doesn't work to write down right now for you, I've got a checklist called Deschool Your Homeschool Checklist. It is a list of lucky 13 questions. So you can access that on my website, www.capturingthecharmedlife.com. I have other opportunities for you to dig deep into your ideas around your homeschool and how to get more freedom for your homeschool. You can do that through group coaching. I provide an intensive and a 5-week coaching session for essentially 2 to 5 homeschool moms to dig deep into the things that are truly concerning them. I also have online courses. I have a Deschool Your Homeschool journaling workbook that you can do as a self-coaching tool as well. I wish you and your homeschool family the freedom, the individualization that you can wield, and a sense of purpose in your homeschool life. To close, I want to share with you this quote that has been an encouragement to me across the years by John Taylor Gatto. Whatever an education is, it should make you a unique individual, not a conformist. It should furnish you with an original spirit with which to tackle the big challenges. It should allow you to find values, which you will discover are your roadmap through life. It should make you spiritually rich, a person who loves whatever you're doing. Wherever you are, whoever you're with, it should teach you what is important, how to live, and how to die. And thanks for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure to connect with you. I would love it if you could reach out to me, whether that is through my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. I'm on Instagram at Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Facebook, same name, and my website, which I named long before I ever considered writing a book or doing a podcast or being a life coach. It is capturing the charmed life. And between you and me, I've learned there are a whole lot of charms in homeschooling, but there's also challenges. So I'm here to help you turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. Thanks for spending time with me.